the rain that wouldn't stop. The first thing I remember is the sound, not of crying, not yet, but the steady hum of rain against metal, a parking lot, mostly empty, the kind of place people forget exists. Strip mall gone quiet, paint chipping from old signs, one flickering street lamp struggling against the dark, and beneath it, the shape. I saw him before I saw her. A heap of wet fur, breath fogging the air in short, heavy puffs. His ribs showed, not clearly, but enough that you could tell this wasn't new for him. Hunger, cold, waiting. He didn't move when I opened my door. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and still. Not warning, not pleading, just watching. Then I saw what was under him. The blanket was soaked through, edges clinging to the asphalt. I thought maybe it was trash until it shifted, just slightly, and I saw the hand. Tiny, pale. Still I froze. I didn't run. I didn't yell. Something about the way the dog curled tighter stopped me. His body had formed a circle, the baby tucked inside it like something he'd found and claimed. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just lowered his head again, as if to say, "This is all I have. Please, let it be enough." I moved slowly, the kind of slow you only use when something fragile is involved. I dropped to my knees beside them. My jeans soaked immediately through. My breath steamed out into the cold, but I didn't feel it. I looked at her face, the baby, no more than a year, maybe less. Her lips were blue at the corners, but her eyes fluttered, opened, closed again, not afraid, not even startled, just tired. So tired I reached for the blanket. That's when he finally moved, not to attack, not even to push me back. He laid his paw, one heavy, trembling paw, across her chest. Gentle, but firm, as if to say, "She's not yours. Not yet." I think that's the moment something in me cracked open. Not like breaking, more like a soft tearing. The way old fabric gives way when it's been holding too much for too long. I had come here for a coffee. Just a late shift, cold, night, warm drink. I hadn't expected anything more, but there they were. Two souls that didn't belong to this place. And somehow, neither did I anymore. I opened the back door of my car. Old blanket, clean towel, the stuff I kept from a past I rarely talked about. I didn't say a word. I just waited, and after what felt like hours, though it was maybe only seconds, the shepherd stood. His legs shook. He looked at the baby, then at me, and together, we lifted her. I wrapped her in the towel. I felt her chest rise, just faintly. She was alive. He followed us in, no leash, no commands, just trust, raw and unfinished. As I drove, I kept glancing at the mirror. The baby was cradled in the back seat, still wrapped. Her breath steadied. The shepherd never took his eyes off her, not once. He sat upright the whole way, soaked, bleeding from a nick on his leg I hadn't noticed before, and for the first time in years, I prayed, not loudly, just one line. Let me be enough for them, please. Let me be enough. The smell of rain and memory. The rain followed us. It streaked across the windshield in soft waves, catching the glow of streetlights like threads of silver, unraveling in the dark. The wipers moved slowly, and I didn't speed up. I didn't want to jolt them. The baby had stopped shivering. The shepherd hadn't. I didn't have a plan. The kind of night this was, no one did. There wasn't time for questions or logic, only instinct, and something deeper, older. Maybe grief has its own kind of compass. It just doesn't point north. The heater in the car was broken. It blew air that was barely warm. Still, I angled the vents toward the back seat, hoping it would be enough. The baby was still wrapped tightly. Her face flushed now, but she hadn't made a sound since I lifted her from the ground. Her silence was its own kind of scream. The shepherd hadn't moved either, just sat still and erect, his ears twitching every few seconds. I saw him glance toward her again and again, checking. like a soldier standing guard over something precious, something holy. The roads were nearly empty. Even the gas stations were dark, metal gates drawn down, fluorescent signs blinking out into the nothing. This town had always been good at shutting down early. You could feel it, the weight of quiet, the way even noise seemed muffled by the past. I didn't take them to the hospital. I know what that sounds like. Irresponsible, dangerous even. But I knew the system too well. I knew what it would do. A found baby, an unidentified dog. It would become a process. Paperwork, forms, questions, cold rooms, and separation. The kind of separation you don't come back from. Instead, I drove to the place I hadn't seen in nearly a year. A side road, gravel-lined, barely lit. The mailbox still leaned sideways, rusted through the middle. The fence had fallen on one side, leaning into the weeds like it had given up pretending to protect anything. My brother's cabin. No one lived there now. He hadn't come back after the fire. Said it held too many memories, that every room still smelled like smoke and regret. I never told him I kept a key. I pulled in, tires crunching over wet stone, and parked beneath the carport. The roof leaked in one corner, but it was better than nothing. When I opened the back door, the shepherd moved first. He stepped out into the rain, shaking once. A full body trembled that sent droplets flying. Then he turned to watch as I lifted her again. She didn't cry, just blinked up at me, eyes glassy and unfocused. I used my coat this time, heavy, canvas. I pressed her against my chest, and I could feel the slow thump of her heart, faint but steady. She was warmer now. The shepherd walked beside me as I climbed the steps to the porch. No leash, no sound, just presence. The door stuck, it always had, but I shouldered it open. The smell hit me first, old ash, damp wood, dust, and beneath it all, something faint and bitter, like forgotten tears. I crossed the room slowly, my boots echoing over bare wood. There was still an old sofa near the fireplace, covered in a sheet. I laid her there, gently, then pulled a quilt from the hall closet. My brother's ex had made it. Green and gold, stitched by hand. She looked smaller than ever, wrapped inside. The shepherd stood beside the couch. His fur was drying now, stiff in patches. He smelled of earth and smoke, and something else, something older. A memory, maybe. I knelt beside him. That's when I noticed the scar. It ran along his flank, hidden beneath the fur. Long, clean. A surgical line, the kind you don't get from a fight. Someone had cared for him once. Someone had tried to save him. I didn't touch it. I just looked, and for the first time, he met my eyes fully. Not with fear, not even with hope, just knowing. I whispered, "Where did you come from?" He blinked, turned back toward the baby. That was his answer. I found a bowl in the cupboard, filled it with water from the old water pump, brought it to him. He drank, slowly, his tongue rasping against the metal. Then he lay down, not at my feet, but beside the couch, guarding her. Again, the room was silent, save for the ticking of an old clock that hadn't kept time since 2019. I lit one of the oil lamps I found under the sink. The electricity had been shut off for months, maybe longer. I pulled an old sleeping bag from the storage bin and unrolled it on the floor. I didn't even think about calling anyone. Not yet. Instead, I just watched them. The baby's breath was soft, rising and falling beneath the quilt. The dog's chest moved in quiet rhythm beside her. Every now and then, he'd glance at the door, like he was listening for someone I couldn't hear. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster, and remembering. The last time I'd been in this room, it had been raining then too. My brother had thrown a bottle against that same wall, screamed something about second chances, not meaning anything if you didn't survive the first. I hadn't spoken to him since now. Here I was, surrounded by ghosts, some old, some brand new, and a dog who refused to leave the side of a baby, who didn't belong to anyone. Or maybe she did. Maybe she belonged to him. I wondered what kind of life he had known before this, who had trained him to protect like that, who had taught him to hold still while the rain poured down, while her little chest rose and fell against his ribs. And why had no one come looking for them? Outside, the wind picked up. Rain hit the windows sideways now. A shutter banged loose. But inside, the room felt suspended, like time had stopped to listen. The baby made a soft sound in her sleep. Not quite a whimper. More like a sigh. The shepherd stood again, padded to her side, nuzzled the edge of the blanket with his nose, then lay back down. One paw stretched just slightly over her feet. Not controlled. Connection. I watched them until the sky began to lighten, not with sunshine, but with the thin gray that comes before dawn. And I thought, whatever brought them to that parking lot, whatever broke them loose from the world they knew, it's not done with them yet, and neither am I. Shadows in the quiet light morning came without sunlight, just a pale wash of gray through the broken blinds. The rain had stopped sometime in the early hours, but the wet hung in the air like a breath waiting to be exhaled. You could hear the trees drip outside, water falling leaf to leaf, like a slow kind of clock. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her, the baby lying still, in the back seat, blue-lipped and silent, or the dog, planted like a sentinel, in the dark. They had appeared in my life the way some people disappear, without a sound, without an explanation. The baby stirred first, not much, just the soft curling of fingers beneath the quilt, a flutter of her eyes, the way a child drifts to the surface, of waking without really breaking through. I knelt beside her again. Her hair was damp, but warm, brown, with a curl at the ends. Her cheeks no longer looked gray. There was color there now, subtle but real, like something lost was coming back. She looked up at me, but not like a stranger. No fear, just watchfulness, like she was trying to remember something she hadn't been taught yet. I whispered, "Hi." She blinked once, then slowly reached toward the edge of the blanket, fingers brushing the worn threads. Behind her, the shepherd rose. I hadn't heard him move, but there he was, standing again, tail still, eyes locked on her. He didn't acknowledge me. He didn't have to. He wasn't here for me. I brought water first, in a bottle I'd warmed a little near the oil lamp. She didn't resist when I touched her cheek, just tilted toward me slightly, like a flower toward a faint light. She was thirsty. She didn't drink with urgency, not like a child in pain, but slowly, like she was remembering how I let her take her time. She never looked away from the shepherd, even while she drank. Her eyes found him between every sip, like he was her compass, and he didn't take his gaze off her, not for a moment. The way he stood there, still but alert. I'd seen it before, years ago. Afghanistan, a working dog on patrol, eyes forward, body low, pulse locked on the soldier he was trained to follow. It looked like loyalty, but I knew better. It was love, the kind born in silence and scar tissue, the kind you can't teach. I let them stay like that for a while, the baby watching him, the dog watching her, me watching both. I made oatmeal on a small propane burner I'd kept in the supply closet. It had sat unused since my brother's last trip up here. Back when things still resembled something close to normal. I didn't make any for myself. Just fed her one soft spoonful at a time, watching to make sure she swallowed. She did. Then she surprised me. She reached for the spoon. Her hand was small, trembling slightly, but her grip was firm, not wild, not chaotic, purposeful. She guided it clumsily toward her own mouth and missed, oatmeal falling across her quilt. I didn't laugh. I just set the spoon down and let her try again. The third time, she got it right. And the shepherd finally eased down beside her again, this time with a low, settling breath. Like even that small motion of hers had given him permission to rest. That's when I noticed the tag. It had been hidden beneath the heavy fur at his neck, matted, tangled, hard to see in the rain, but in the soft light of morning, as he shifted, slightly it caught. I moved closer, slowly. He didn't growl, didn't move. I reached forward, fingers brushing the thick, knotted hair. There it was, a small, dull metal tag, the name nearly scratched away, not a full color, just a tag looped onto a remnant of leather that looked chewed, frayed at both ends. I turned it gently, trying to read just one word, Milo. The rest had rusted out. A phone number, probably, maybe an address. All gone now. All lost. I said the name softly. Milo. His ears twitched, but he didn't move otherwise. The baby turned her head then, looking at me, then at him. I repeated it, more certain this time. Milo. She smiled. The first time I'd seen her smile, it wasn't wide, not the kind of grin people take pictures of. Just a soft curl of the mouth, as if hearing his name unlocked something inside her that no warmth or food could. Milo. It suited him somehow. Solid, gentle, watchful. I sat back on my heels and let the name sit between us. I didn't know what to do next. No one had come looking. No sirens. No missing child alerts buzzing my phone. No patrols combing the streets. It had been nearly 10 hours since I'd found them, and the world was still silent. Too silent. I checked the news on my phone. Spotty reception, but I managed to load a local feed. Nothing. No Amber Alerts. No police bulletins. It didn't make sense. Children didn't just vanish like that. Not without someone screaming their name into the dark. Not without desperate hands pulling up photos and memory fragments. And dogs like Milo. They didn't end up alone in parking lots, unless someone put them there. On purpose. That thought settled in my chest like cold iron. The baby, still without a name, leaned against the back of the couch, eyes growing heavy again. Milo shifted just enough to press against her side. A soft, instinctive motion, protective. I watched them drift into sleep, and I felt it again, that deep, aching whisper in my bones. Not fear, not even sadness, but recognition. I knew what it meant, to be left behind, to be the one who waited after the storm. I knew what it meant to lose everything and be expected to go on breathing like you hadn't. They weren't just strangers. Not anymore. Somehow, they belonged to the same silence I did. The wind outside had died down. Stillness pressed against the cabin like a held breath. I sat on the floor and leaned against the wall, knees drawn to my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. The echo of familiar roads the second morning was colder. No rain this time, just a dull, bone-deep chill that crept in under the walls and settled like dust across the floorboards. The kind of cold that doesn't announce itself with ice or wind. It just arrives. I woke in the same spot I'd fallen asleep, upright against the wall, knees locked, back aching. The baby was still on the couch, curled into the quilt like a secret kept safe. Milo lay at her feet, head resting between his front paws, eyes half open, always watching. I don't know what time it was. The sky outside was the color of unwashed steel. No sunrise, no warmth, just light enough to remind you the night had passed, even if nothing inside had changed. I stood slowly, joints stiff and stretched. My body felt older than it was, the kind of wear that isn't from age, but from carrying things no one else sees. I walked to the window and peeled back the corner of the curtain. Nothing. No tracks in the driveway. No car, no visitors. Just the woods, close and quiet. The air hung heavy, unmoved. Even the birds seemed reluctant to break the silence. Still no alerts on my phone. No missed calls. No police searching for a missing child. No panicked family reports. Just an empty inbox, and a town pretending none of this had happened. I turned back toward them, Milo hadn't moved. He was awake now, fully, watching me, measuring my next step, not out of fear, out of duty. Whatever had brought him here, whatever had bound him to that child, it was unshakable. And that kind of loyalty doesn't just appear, it's earned, the way scars are earned, slowly, quietly, through loss. The baby stirred. She opened her eyes, slowly, like she was expecting something to be different. When she saw Milo beside her, she smiled again, not wide, just enough. Her hand reached out, landing gently against his fur. His ear twitched in response. But he didn't move away. I approached with the same slowness I had the day before, still uncertain, still unwilling to disrupt whatever fragile peace had settled over the three of us. I brought more warm water, another bowl of oatmeal. She ate again, more this time, stronger. Still silent, no name, no sound, just that same wide-eyed, searching gaze. I asked again, almost whispering, "Where's your mama?" No response, not even a flicker in her expression. Just quiet, gentle, chewing, watching me, and Milo watching her. That morning, I tried something I hadn't dared to the day before. I bundled her again, gently, slowly, and slipped her into the baby carrier I'd buried years ago, in the storage chest, at the back of the cabin, a leftover from a time I never talked about, from someone I used to be. It still smelled faintly of lavender and sweat and something I didn't have words for. I adjusted the straps carefully. She didn't resist, just leaned against my chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Milo walked beside me as I stepped out onto the porch. The sky had brightened some, not much, just a soft pale wash across the treetops. The air was thick with the smell of wet bark and moss. Everything felt damp, even the light. I started walking down the road, not for a destination, I didn't have one, just the act of moving forward. My boots scuffed against gravel. Milo's paws padded silently beside me. The baby breathed against my chest, steady and slow. We passed the old turnoff, where the river used to run wider. The bridge was still out, had been since the floods 2 years back. No one fixed it. No one came that far anymore. I took a left, toward the edge of town, where the older houses sat crooked on their foundations, and mailboxes leaned like they were tired of standing. We walked past the faded white house with wind chimes that hadn't chimed in years, past the sagging red barn whose door never closed properly, past the place I'd once brought flowers to, back when I believed flowers could change something. Everything looked the same, and everything felt different. People peeked from behind curtains. I could feel their eyes. A baby against my chest. A large dog beside me. No stroller. No explanation. But no one came out. That's the thing about small towns. They notice everything, but they rarely ask. They just watch, then turn back to their coffee and their static-filled radios. We walked for almost an hour. The baby slept, most of it. Milo never broke stride. Then I saw it. The old church. Not the one in town, the bigger one, with the bright stained glass and loud Sunday crowds. This one was smaller, stone, tucked into a bend in the road like it had grown there. It hadn't held a service in years, but someone still tended to the grounds. A few wilting flowers by the steps. The grass trimmed barely. I stopped at the gate. Milo stopped beside me. I don't know why I paused there. Maybe because it was quiet. Maybe because the last time I'd stood in front of a church was the day I left everything behind. I stepped through the gate. Inside, the church smelled like old paper and dust, wood polish, memory. The baby shifted against me, and something strange happened. Milo hesitated, just for a second. His front paw hovered, mid-step, then he followed. Inside, I found a small bench near the stained glass window. It was cracked near the top, the face of some saint long since weathered away. But the light through the glass cast colors across the baby's face. She smiled in her sleep. Milo lay down by the pew, close enough to touch, not quite touching. I sat, and for the first time in days, I let the quiet hold me, and I remembered something I hadn't let myself think about in years. The sound of a smaller breath, once pressed against my chest, the feel of soft weight in my arms, the memory of watching a heartbeat through cotton cloth, my daughter, gone before her first birthday, a fever, a mistake, a delay that caused too much time, and me, after, hollowed out and half alive. The man who'd once believed in second chances became the man who stopped believing in anything at all. But now, this child, this dog, this silence that somehow carried meaning again. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Milo let out a breath, long, low, almost human in its release, and for the first time, I whispered it aloud. You lost someone too, didn't you? He didn't look at me, just blinked. But I knew. There are things no one teaches you, things you just understand. Pain recognizes pain. Loss recognizes its mirror. I stayed there until the light shifted again, and I knew it was time to go. Back to the cabin, back to waiting, back to the stillness that somehow didn't feel so empty anymore. A name almost remembered by the time we returned to the cabin. The sky had settled into a flat, featureless gray, the kind that doesn't hint at rain or sun, just lingers, like it's holding its breath. I unbuckled the baby from the carrier, her body soft against mine. She'd slept most of the walk, her head pressed to my chest, one small hand tucked beneath her chin. Milo stayed close the whole way, never straying more than a few steps, his gaze sweeping the edges of every tree line, every rustle of brush, always alert, always ready. Inside, the air still held the chill of the morning. I relit the oil lamp. Its low flame flickered against the peeling wallpaper, casting long shadows behind the old furniture. I laid her on the couch again, pulled the quilt back around her. She didn't cry. That was the thing about her, not a single tear since I'd found her. No sounds of panic, no wailing confusion, just silence, and eyes that seemed older than they had any right to be. I sat beside the couch, just close enough to watch her breathing. Milo lowered himself to the floor again, one paw outstretched toward her, his side pressed against the leg of the sofa. His body was cleaner now. The rain had washed away the worst of the mud and blood, but he still carried the scent of ash and something older, like smoke clinging to a burned-out memory. I found myself reaching for the dog tag again. Milo. The name felt like a thread I hadn't finished pulling. Not frayed, not snapped, just unfinished, like there was more to it. A second half, a whisper of something once shouted. The rest of the tag had been too worn to read, but there was a symbol near the bottom, barely etched, half faded. A tree, not a full tree, not some artist's rendering, just the rough shape of a pine, carved quick and shallow, like someone had pressed it there with urgency. It stuck with me. I had seen that symbol before. I didn't know where, not yet, but it felt familiar in the way a scent can remind you of a childhood room you forgot you ever slept in. The baby stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, lashes fluttering against flushed cheeks. For a moment, she looked at the ceiling blank, expressionless. Then she turned her head to find Milo. The change in her was instant. Not a smile this time, but something quieter. A release in her shoulders, a softening in her mouth. Her hand reached again, always the same gesture, seeking his fur like a grounding wire. He didn't move. He didn't have to. Their bond was already written. She turned her head toward me then, just slightly. Our eyes met. I'd never felt so seen by someone so small. I whispered, "Do you remember your name?" No answer. Of course. She just watched me, wide-eyed and open, as if trying to pull something from the space between us. I tried again. "Can you tell me anything?" A long pause. Breath between us. Then she made a sound. Not a word, not even a syllable. Just a hum, soft, uneven, rising in the back of her throat like a lullaby half forgotten. She wasn't looking at me when she did it. She was looking at the lamp, at the flame inside it. Her lips moved, not speech, just motion. I leaned in. She hummed again. And then, almost inaudible, came something close to a name. MEH. ... It wasn't clear. It wasn't even full. But I froze. She said it again, or tried to. Her mouth shaped it differently this time. Maybe Mela, maybe something else entirely. But it wasn't random. She knew what she was trying to say. I repeated it softly, Mila. She blinked. Her eyes shifted slightly, like she was listening for an echo in the dark. Milo stood, his ears perked, body tense, not with fear, with recognition. He stepped forward, slowly, and laid his muzzle gently beside her on the couch. Her small hand found his ear again, curling into the fur there. I whispered it again, Mila. This time, the baby, this may be Mila, made a soft noise, not quite a hum, not quite a word, but she didn't look confused. She looked comforted. It was a beginning, and that's when something shifted in me, not just curiosity, not just concern, something older, deeper, a need to understand who she was, where she came from, what had brought her and Milo to that parking lot, to that moment in the rain, alone, and why no one was coming. I stood and stepped out to the porch. Milo followed me, just far enough to keep her in sight through the open door. The wind was picking up again. The trees moved like slow waves, their branches whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. I pulled out my phone. Still no alerts, no reports. But I tried something different this time. I opened the local community app, one of those neighborhood forums where people posted lost pets, yard sales, and too many photos of weathered fences. I searched for lost dog, SCROLLED, and stopped. 3 days ago, a blurry image, low resolution, but it was Milo, standing beside a chain-link fence. Looking out, the caption read, "Seen near the edge of Old Miller's Road, looks injured." Had a tag that says Milo. Anyone know this dog? No updates, no comments. But there was something else. The user who posted it had uploaded a second image. In the comments, a paw print pressed into the mud beside the dog. Not his. Smaller, delicate. A child's eye stared at the photo. The mud had dried around it. You could see the tread of a small shoe, the shape of the toes. Who had taken that photo? Why hadn't they followed? I clicked the profile. A first name only, Janie. No last name. No public posts since just that one glimpse, that one window. I sent a message. I think I found this dog, and the child that was with him. Please call me. I added my number. Then I waited. Milo returned. To the baby's side. He lay down, this time resting his head across her lap. She curled into him, thumb near her mouth, eyelids heavy again. A soft peace had settled between them, as if they'd been granted a moment of stillness between waves, and I stood there, holding a phone that didn't ring, watching two souls I hadn't known 2 days ago somehow become the axis of everything I hadn't known. I was still holding on to Dot. If her name was Mila, if that was even close, then maybe there was more buried beneath that silence. More she remembered, but couldn't say. And maybe, just maybe, Milo was the only one who could help her say it. The way he weighted it was in the small things. The way Milo now moved only when she moved. The way she reached for him, not just when afraid or waking, but now with purpose. Familiarity. Like he wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her anchor, and maybe she was his. By the third day, their rhythm had taken root inside the silence of the cabin. There were no schedules, no clocks. But somehow, every gesture felt timed, every breath shared between them, every pause laced with meaning. She slept more easily now, ate with less prompting. There were still no words, only those low, unfinished hums. Fragments of sounds she couldn't yet shape. but her eyes said more than enough. And Milo. He was changing to not in any outward, dramatic way. He didn't suddenly become playful or relaxed. No tempting, no barking. But there was a softening in him, in the way he no longer flinched when I passed behind him. The way he would lie closer to my feet at night. The way he had begun to accept water from my hand instead of the bowl. He was letting me in, slowly, quietly, as if testing the weight of my presence. But only because of her, she made it safe. That morning, I found her crouched near the front window, one hand pressed flat against the glass. She was looking out, not urgently, just watching. Rain had begun again, light and constant, falling in diagonal streaks across the yard. Milo sat beside her, his body forming a loose curve behind her like a living wall. She tapped the window once, then again. I knelt beside her. "What do you see?" I whispered. She didn't point, just kept watching, and that's when I noticed. Her eyes weren't tracking anything in the yard. She wasn't watching the trees or the rain. She was watching the sky. The way it broke into slow gray ripples. The way the light shifted behind the clouds. Her lips moved again. That same half-name Ma. Not quite Mila. Not quite anything. But then, she turned and laid her hand against Milo's neck. And for the first time, I understood. She wasn't trying to remember her name. She was saying his Milo. That quiet syllable had somehow become everything. I stepped out onto the porch after she napped, needing air, needing space to think. The rain had eased to a mist. I left the door cracked open. I knew Milo wouldn't let anything happen to her. He barely left her side for more than a few seconds. I sat on the edge of the porch, the old boards soft beneath me, damp with age. There was a stillness here I hadn't known I missed. Not just quiet stillness. A complete kind. The kind that lets you feel your own breath again. I closed my eyes and let the damp soak into my sleeves. That's when I heard it. A truck, somewhere down the hill. Not close, but not far either. I stood slowly, stepped off the porch, walked to the tree line. It was a county vehicle, bright orange stripe down the side, dented hood. One of the maintenance trucks that occasionally passed through to check the old utility boxes along the mountain roads. It stopped at the old fork, maybe 50 yards away. The driver got out, checked a box on the post, didn't look toward the cabin, but Milo was already at the door. He hadn't barked. He didn't growl. He just stood there, alert, body still, eyes fixed. The baby, she was awake now, standing behind him, fingers curled in the back of his fur. I stepped back onto the porch and waved toward the man at the road. He glanced up, nodded, just a wave, just a nod, that was all. But Milo didn't relax until the truck pulled away, taillights disappearing into the trees. He turned to her, sniffed her face gently, then nudged her back toward the couch. She followed him, obedient, trusting. That's when I realized something. I hadn't let myself name until then. He wasn't just protecting her. He was raising her, teaching her how to move through the world again, as if she'd already known once, and needed someone to show her how to find it again. That afternoon, something shifted again. She found the box. It had been tucked under the old workbench, filled with things my brother left behind. Worn tools, broken flashlights, and an old plush bear missing one ear. She pulled it out with both hands, eyes wide. She didn't hug it. She studied it, turned it in her hands, looked at the torn stitching. Then she sat beside Milo and laid the bear beside his paw. He sniffed it, nudged it, then looked at her. She smiled. Again, not just the curl of her lips this time. Her whole face lifted. And then she made a sound. Ma. Just one syllable. Breath behind it. Heart too. Milo licked her cheek. It wasn't just instinct anymore. It was connection. A language. That didn't need words. That night, she crawled into my lap for the first time. No prompting. No invitation. just climbed up slowly and leaned against me, her head resting beneath my chin. Her hair smelled like dust and the lavender soap I found in a drawer. Her body was warm, familiar. Milo lay at my feet, his head turned slightly too. Watch her face. I didn't move. Didn't breathe for a long moment. Because this was the moment I hadn't dared want. The one where trust stopped being a distant hope and became something real. I wanted to ask her everything. I wanted to know who she was, where she came from, how she'd ended up alone in the rain with a dog who guarded her like a ghost. But I didn't ask because I understood now this story wasn't going to be told in answers. It would be told in gestures, glances, moments like this one, where a child learns how to lean, and a dog learns how to stay, and a man learns how to feel again. The oil lamp flickered low. I pulled the quilt around both of us, and Milo, he didn't move to the door or the window. He stayed, not because he was keeping watch, but because, for the first time since I found them, he didn't need to. Things that don't need to be taught. The cabin had started to feel like memory, not mine, exactly, not hers either, but something in between. A space suspended from time. The world outside moved on, I knew that, but in here, we breathed slower, steadier, like we were being taught how to live again, one quiet minute at a time. On the 5th morning, she woke before me. I didn't notice at first. I opened my eyes to the sound of her bare feet pattering across the wood. No crying, no calling, just the soft hush of motion and Milo's claws clicking behind her like a shadow. When I sat up, they were already at the window. She stood with her arms draped over the sill, her breath fogging the glass. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, and a low mist clung to the ground outside. The trees looked softer, muted, as if they were still waking. Milo sat directly behind her, one paw just barely touching the hem of her sleep shirt. She reached up, drew a shape into the fog with her finger, a circle, then another, then a line through both. I watched her from across the room, not wanting to interrupt whatever quiet ritual was taking place between her and the glass. Milo's eyes flicked toward me, then back to her. She kept drawing, patterns I didn't recognize. Symbols, maybe just motion for motion's sake. Then she stopped, turned, and walked straight to me. She held up her hands, not in question, not in protest. Just lifted them, the way children do when they've decided you are safe. I picked her up. She laid her head against my chest like she'd done it 1,000 times before. But this time, she stayed. One hand fisted into the fabric of my shirt. Her breathing was calm, steady. Milo followed us into the kitchen corner, sat beneath the edge of the counter while I prepared oatmeal again. I'd found a can of peaches the day before, tucked behind an old bag of flour. I added a few slices to the bowl, and she smiled at the sweetness. We ate in silence, not awkward silence, the kind that's shared, comfortable, and for the first time, I caught myself humming. A tune I didn't remember learning. Something my mother used to hum under her breath while folding laundry. I hadn't heard it in decades, but now it came back. Simple, wordless, real. Milo lifted his head, ears tilting slightly, and the baby, she hummed with me. Not perfectly in tune, not quite the same rhythm, but close enough to be called harmony. I didn't stop. We hummed together while the mist lifted outside. That afternoon, I took them to the edge of the clearing. Behind the cabin, there was a broken fence line there, old wood posts leaning inward, half swallowed by weeds. The grass was soft from the rain, and the sky had opened just enough to let shafts of pale light spill through the trees. She ran, for the first time, far, just a few feet, just enough. She toddled toward a patch of wildflowers, small blue things sprouting low to the ground. Milo stayed close, his body always one step behind, never blocking her path. He didn't bark, didn't chase. He watched, and I watched him. He was her. Miro. When she stepped too close to the fence, he angled himself to gently nudge her back, not with his nose, with presence, position. She responded immediately. No scolding, no fear, just a quiet shift. They moved together like that for almost half an hour, a pair of ghosts learning how to be whole again. I stayed seated on the stump near the old fire pit, just watching, letting the ache in my chest settle into something softer. I thought about what it meant to be raised in silence, what it meant to learn the world, not through words, but through gestures. Trust, space. She didn't need correction. She needed company. And Milo, he gave it to her without hesitation. No leash, no rules, just devotion. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. Later, when the sun dipped behind the trees, we went inside. She was tired but calm, and I bathed her in the old tin basin, with warm water boiled on the stove. She didn't fuss. She leaned back against my hand and closed her eyes. She trusted me now, not completely, not in the way Milo had earned, but enough. Enough for the weight of her head to feel like a promise. I wrapped her in a towel that used to be blue, and now was more memory than fabric. She fell asleep before I finished drying her hair. Milo watched everything from the doorway, never in the way, never demanding, just there. I laid her on the couch again, covered her with the quilt. Milo circled once at the foot of the couch, then settled with his chin resting near her ankle. That's when I opened the notebook. It had been sitting in the drawer since before they arrived, the one I kept for myself. Not a journal? Not really, just scattered thoughts. Scraps of things I never had the courage to say out loud. I flipped to a fresh page, and I wrote, "They are teaching me how to be still, how to listen, how to stay." The words looked strange in my handwriting, like they didn't belong to the person who'd lived in this skin a year ago. I added, "She is learning how to smile. He is remembering how to rest, and I am not as empty as I was." I closed the notebook softly. Milo looked up at the sound. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since I found him, I didn't just see alertness. I saw something like agreement, an acknowledgement. We were both waiting for something, but no longer waiting alone. The message I'd sent days ago to Janie, the woman who posted about Milo, still hadn't been answered. No response. No read receipt. I checked again that night before sleep. Nothing. I wanted to push, to search, but something in me said wait. The story wasn't ready yet, and neither were they. That night, I kept the lamp burning longer. I sat beside them, not as a guardian, not as a rescuer, just as part of the rhythm. Milo breathing slow at her feet, her breath matching his, and me in between them, no longer on the outside of the silence, but inside it, held by it. In the early hours, sometime before dawn, she made a sound in her sleep. Not crying, not calling, just a soft exhale, shaped like something half-remembered. Milo. It was the closest she'd come yet. I opened my eyes, sat up. She didn't wake, but Milo. Milo lifted his head and laid it gently on her chest, and I watched them, two beings stitched together by something beyond explanation, something older than memory, stronger than loss, quieter than love. The kind of bond that doesn't need to be taught. It just is. The knock that didn't sound like troublet had been 6 days. 6 days since the rain-soaked parking lot. 6 days since a German shepherd stood sentinel over a baby who didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't belong to anyone. 6 days since I found them, or maybe since they found me. Time moved differently now. I didn't keep track of hours. Not exactly. I marked the days by her small progress, by the softness in Milo's gaze, by the way the silence began to feel less like absence and more like presence. She still hadn't spoken a full word, but I'd stopped waiting for one. Her voice had shaped now small hums, a whisper of sound when she pressed her face into Milo's fur. A rhythm, a language all her own. and in that language, she had given him a new name, not Milo, not the sharp syllable on his worn tag. She called him it, a breathy sound, barely there. It. She said it when she woke, when she needed comfort, when she pressed her forehead against his flank. It became a kind of prayer, and he answered. Every time. That morning the wind shifted. I felt it before I heard it, the kind of shift that doesn't come with a storm, but with something quieter, like the forest exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I stepped outside with a coffee mug that hadn't seen actual coffee in weeks, just hot water and old habits. Milo followed, staying just beneath the doorway, his paws curled under him, eyes on the woods. She was still asleep on the couch, a stuffed bear now permanently within her reach, her thumb tucked loosely near her mouth. The wind moved again, and with it, a sound, not the creak of trees, not the cry of a bird, a car engine, far off, too far to see, but close enough to feel in my chest, the way some sounds bypass the ears and go straight into the ribs. I went still. Milo didn't move, but his ears twitched. It could have been a truck passing the outer road, or a ranger's vehicle checking the forest lines. But I knew this place. People didn't come out here unless they meant to. 15 minutes passed, maybe 20. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just 3 slow taps. Milo stood immediately, silent but solid. He didn't bark, didn't snarl. He positioned himself in front of the couch, blocking her from the door. His body was a wall. I stepped forward, heart drumming. Another knock. Still calm, still polite, but somehow heavier now. I opened the door. He was older than I expected, maybe late 50s, weathered but neat. A park services jacket, dark green, state-issued boots, a clipboard in one hand, a calm face, not a cop. Not quite. He nodded once. Morning. I didn't answer at first. He glanced past me, not aggressively, just taking in the inside, the faint light, the shape of the dog, the flash of a child's hair behind the quilt. I'm Jim, he said, voice quiet. With forest management, we do soft sweeps this time of year, checking for squatters, signs of animal activity, that kind of thing. Still, I didn't speak. He smiled, gently. Didn't mean to spook you. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. It was a reflex, protection more than distrust. She yours? He asked, softly. The question wasn't sharp. No accusation, just a human voice, uncertain. I didn't answer. He didn't push, just adjusted the clipboard in his hands. Thing is, a woman up north reported seeing a dog, German Shepherd, fit the description. Same one from that post last week. My mouth felt dry. She posted a photo, he continued, said she saw the dog near the train depot. 3 days before that big rain. Said there might have been a child nearby, but it was dusk. She wasn't sure. I felt something in me tighten. I know it's a long shot, he added, but a kid missing is a serious thing. You hear anything about it? I kept my eyes on the gravel beneath us. Double quotes, no one's filed a report yet, he said, lowering the clipboard. That's the strange part. No kid matching her description has been logged missing, at least not locally. She's not from here, I said. Finally, his eyes lifted. You know that for sure. No, I admitted, but it feels true. He didn't take notes. Didn't write anything. Just stood there, letting the silence stretch. Then he said something that surprised me. You've got a good dog. I looked up. I saw him through the door, he said. The way he stood between her and me. You don't train that. You don't teach it. That's loyalty. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He nodded toward the road. There's a storm coming tonight. You'll feel it in your bones before you see it. If you need anything, propane, dry goods, I can drop some off. I hesitated. He handed me a card, just a number. No title, no department seal. Sometimes the system's too slow, he said, almost to himself. Sometimes it's people like us that hold the line until it catches up. He turned to leave, then stopped. If you figure out where she belongs, he said, make sure she still wants to go there. He didn't wait for a reply, just walked back to the truck. Tires crunching slowly over gravel until the sound disappeared into trees. I stood there long after he was gone. The card trembled slightly in my hand. When I went back inside, Milo hadn't moved from his post. She was still asleep, one hand resting on the bear, the other curled against the couch. Her face was peaceful, safe. But something had shifted. The outside world knew. Maybe not fully, maybe not yet, but it was stirring, and I felt something then, not panic, not dread, just a quiet, aching fear, not of being found, but of what it might mean for her to be taken away. Because now, she had rhythms, she had trust, she had Milo, and she had, in her own small way, me. That night, the wind came harder. The trees outside leaned and groaned against it. Rain tapped the roof with more urgency. The lamp flickered. I moved the couch closer to the hearth. Milo lay at her back, curled protectively, his body rising and falling in rhythm with hers. I sat close, watching the storm through the slats of the blinds, and I thought about the man's last words. Make sure she still wants to go there. And I knew whatever had come before, whatever story had led her to that parking lot, the next chapter would have to be a choice. Hers. The things that wait at the threshold. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came with pressure, the kind that settles behind the eyes, the kind that makes old wood groan and memories stir, the kind that makes you listen harder to everything, the wind, the stillness, the breath of a sleeping child. By the time night fell, the trees were swaying like they were remembering something. Rain followed close behind, tapping the windows. Like a stranger, too polite to knock. Inside. The three of us stayed close. Milo hadn't left her side all day, not even to eat. When I laid a bowl near him that morning, he nudged it gently toward her, as if offering it first. She touched it, then looked at me. I nodded. It's for him, sweetheart. He needs it more than I do. She didn't speak, but she pressed her hand against Milo's shoulder, as if giving him permission. Only then did he eat. That was how everything worked now, not through rules or instruction, but through a quiet series of shared understandings. She was speaking, without words, and Milo was answering without sound. I was just trying to keep up. Around dusk, I lit the oil lamp early. The electricity hadn't come back, not that I'd expected it. This place had long since fallen off the grid, but with the wind pushing against the windows and the sky bruising into black, I didn't want the dark to take everything at once. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, Milo curled behind her like a warm ridge of earth. They had made a game, or something like it, with the old deck of cards I'd found in a drawer. She didn't deal or shuffle. Just lined them up, face up, by color and shape. He watched her with unblinking attention. Occasionally, she'd pause and place a card in front of him, and he would lower his head, nose almost touching it, and stay perfectly still. She'd giggle, softly, not loud, not sharp, a muffled little sound, like breath breaking on glass, and I watched from the corner. Notebook open in my lap, pen resting still. It felt like watching the past unfold backward, as if what was happening between them had happened once before, long ago, and was only now being remembered. And then the phone rang, not the cell. That was still tucked away, battery dying. Unread messages fading into a signal-less void. It was the old rotary on the wall. I'd forgotten it even worked. Had assumed the line had long since gone dead. But now, in the middle of a storm, it rang. Once, then again. She looked up at me, frozen. Milo stood. I crossed the room and picked it up. Hello? A long pause. Then a voice. You have them, don't you? The words landed like a stone in still water. I didn't respond. The voice was female, calm, tired. I know you're not the police, she said. If you were, you'd have knocked harder, and you wouldn't have waited this long. More silence. I posted the photo, she said. The one of the dog, and the print. Now I understood. Janie. I closed my eyes. She's okay. Another pause. Janie repeated. She's okay. Yes. She exhaled. You're the first person who's told me that, she said. Even though no one else even knows she's gone. I said nothing. There's no report, she continued, because no one's looking. I opened my mouth to ask why, but she answered before I could speak. She was a foster placement, one of many, in a home with too many locks and not enough eyes. No one kept count. No one paid attention until it was too late. A knot formed behind my ribs. She and the dog disappeared the same night, Janie said. I'm not sure how. I think he took her. I sat down on the edge of the couch. Milo was still standing, facing the door now. She clung to his side. I whispered, he saved her. A rustle of movement on the line. I thought maybe I dreamed that. No, I said. He did. Janie's voice cracked, just slightly. I saw them once, just once, together. She was sitting in the backyard. No toys, no shoes. Just this enormous shepherd sitting beside her like a statue. I could hear her breath, shaky now. She reached for his face, she said, and he let her. He leaned in. I felt tears rise in my own throat, uninvited. I think they chose each other, she said quietly. I whispered, they did. A long silence followed. Then, I'm not calling anyone. I just needed to know they were still together. They are, I said. She sleeps better with him near. He only eats when she says it's okay. Janie let out a soft, broken laugh. That sounds like her. She hasn't spoken yet. Not fully. But she's trying. She will, Janie said, when she's ready. And when she knows the words won't be taken away again. I let that sink in, Janie continued. I left the state the day after she disappeared. I'm not her mother, not officially, but I was the last person who saw her for who she really was. You still can be, I said, before I could stop myself. No, she said gently. That's for you now. I only gave her a name once. You're giving her a voice. I stared at the floor. What do I call her? I asked. Janie hesitated. She never had a real name, she said. Just letters. ML initials stamped on a file. But once, when I tucked her in, she whispered something. She said, I'd like. I closed my eyes, so close to the name she'd been trying to shape all week. Mila Mala, Milo. Milo had been the first sound. But I'd like. Maybe that had always been her name. Thank you, I said. Janie's voice was fading now, like she was speaking from another room, another lifetime. Keep her warm, she said. Keep her safe, and when she chooses to stay, let her. The line clicked. Silence. I replaced the receiver. Turned back toward them. Milo had not moved. Mila stood beside him, gripping his fur tightly. Her eyes met mine, and I knelt. I opened my arms. She didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, and for the first time, not whispered, not unsure, she said it. Then Mila. 2 names, 2 souls, 1 bond, and I held her as the storm circled the cabin, and the dog who had crossed fire and silence to save her lay down at our side. What? You choose in the quiet? The storm didn't leave all at once. It peeled itself away slowly, hour by hour, like someone slipping out of a room they were never supposed to enter. By morning, only the sound of dripping trees remained. The cabin creaked differently now, lighter somehow. The tension had thinned, but hadn't gone entirely. That was the thing about storms. They don't just pass. They leave echoes. Mila was awake before the light touched the windows. She didn't cry or speak, just stood at the edge of the couch, barefoot, her hand resting on Milo's ribs as he breathed. Her other hand clutched the stuffed bear, its ear now chewed flat from days of silent affection. I watched from the corner, half wrapped in the sleeping bag I'd dragged beside them the night before. The embers in the stove were still faintly glowing, the only warmth left in the room. She turned toward me and smiled, not the soft, uncertain curl of her mouth I'd seen before, not the fragile flicker of a child testing joy. This smile was real. Rooted. Milo stretched his legs slowly, like a lion coming out of stillness. His nose touched her wrist. She leaned down, forehead pressed to his. "Mila," I said. Softly. She turned her head and blinked. "Yes," I whispered. "That's you." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. It was in the way she stood, a little taller, that way her feet planted just slightly wider apart. A small child's way of saying, "I know who I am." That morning, I made tea instead of oatmeal. I poured 2 mugs of hot water. Steeped leaves from the jar I found in the cabinet. Herbs my brother used to hoard when he still believed in simple comforts. I held the second cup out to her. She took it carefully. Didn't drink, just held it. Fingers curled around the warmth, and beside her, Milo sat like a shadow stitched into the floorboards. I didn't plan to leave the cabin that day, but something was changing. A current beneath the silence. It started when I stepped out to check the woodpile and found tire tracks leading back down the hill. Not mine, not from Janie. Someone had come while we slept, not close. The tracks stopped maybe 30 feet from the edge of the woods, just far enough to see the house, just close enough to watch. I crouched down, fingers brushing the damp mud, not fresh, maybe from the night before, maybe longer, but they were there. Real. I stood slowly and looked toward the tree line. Stillness. No sign of movement, just trees swaying in the soft wind and the faint hiss of melting snow. But I knew what it meant. The world hadn't forgotten us, not yet. Later that afternoon, as Mila napped and Milo curled at her feet, I walked the perimeter of the cabin, not out of fear, just habit. I needed to feel the boundary, to know how close safety really was. I made it halfway around before I noticed the sound. Not a motor, not boots on gravel, paper. Fluttering. I looked down and saw it tucked into the crack of the doorframe, half hidden beneath a wedge of splintered wood. A manila envelope, no name, no return address, just weight and presence. I carried it inside and set it on the table. Waited until she woke up before I opened it. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted Milo to be near. Maybe because I needed her to hear whatever it was alongside me. The seal broke easily. Inside, a short letter hand-typed and a photograph. I picked up the photo first. It was her, Mila, but smaller, maybe 9 months old, wrapped in a red and gray blanket, one hand reaching toward the camera. Milo beside her, younger too, his fur cleaner, his body leaner. They looked like a portrait. They looked like family. I turned to the letter, to whoever kept them safe. "You don't know me. I'm not her mother. I'm not his trainer. I'm just the one who put the pieces together when no one else did." She was placed in the wrong hands. Again, the kind of hands that lose children without blinking. No reports were filed because the paperwork was never filed in the first place. He was supposed to be retired, military, search and rescue trained, but he was rehomed too many times. One day, they ended up in the same space. I think they saved each other before anyone else had a chance to ruin them. When they disappeared, I didn't ask questions. I just hoped someone good found them. If you're reading this, then someone did. No one's coming, not from the state, not from the system. They've been erased, quietly. This is your choice now. Keep them together, or turn them in. But either way, thank you. I set the paper down. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of it. I looked at Mila. She was sitting quietly beside Milo again. holding the photograph in both hands. She didn't cry. She just touched the edge of the image where her baby self reached, toward the camera. Then she looked at me. I crossed the room and knelt. "This means you're free," I said softly. "It means no one's coming to take you." She tilted her head slightly, listening. "But it also means you get to choose." She reached for my hand, placed the photo there, closed my fingers around it and nodded, not like a child mimicking a gesture, but like someone who understood, in her own quiet way, what was being offered. A life that night. I wrote in my notebook again. She is no longer lost, he is no longer waiting, and I am no longer hollow. I watched them sleep. Mila with one hand on Milo's paw, Milo with his body curled toward her like a question finally answered. And I thought, some bonds are born, others are built, but the ones that hold hardest are the ones no one sees coming. The fire burned low. Outside the world pressed gently at the edges, but inside, we stayed still, together. The weight of choosing to stay there was no ceremony, no sudden change in the weather, no glowing sunrise or soft orchestral swell to tell us something had shifted. It just happened, the way most real things do, quietly, without permission. That morning, Mila didn't wait for me to wake her. She was already standing at the back door when I opened my eyes. Her tiny hand rested on the knob, her forehead pressed against the glass. Milo stood beside her, his reflection dim in the frosted pane. The world outside was brighter than it had been in days. Not warm, not yet, but lit with the kind of light that doesn't last long, cold and golden, like winter learning how to exhale. She turned when I stood, her face already waiting for a question I hadn't yet asked. I knelt down. "Do you want to go outside?" She nodded. I pulled her jacket around her shoulders, the one I'd found in a box of old clothes 2 days earlier. It was too big, sleeves bunched at the wrists, but she didn't mind. She lifted her arms and let me wrap the scarf gently around her neck. Milo followed us out. The air was sharp, but bearable, the kind that made your breath feel visible. Everything sparkled faintly, dew clinging to the long grass, branches crusted in frost. And for the first time Mila didn't stop a few feet from the cabin. She walked straight toward the trees. Let her lead. She didn't walk far, just to the edge of the fence line, to a place where the grass parted around a dip in the land. Milo padded softly behind her, a half step behind, always guarding the space she couldn't see. She crouched beside a small patch of wildflowers, trying to bloom despite the cold, blue and trembling, but still alive. She didn't pick them. She just touched one petal and smiled. That was when I knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing. Later that afternoon, I gathered what little we had into 2 bags, one for food, one for things that couldn't be replaced. The photo, the notebook, the small quilt she'd slept under every night. I didn't know where we were going. I just knew we couldn't stay here forever. The cabin had been sanctuary, but not permanence. A place for healing, not for hiding. She sat at the table as I packed. Her legs swung slowly beneath the chair, not quite touching the floor. Milo sat across from her, watching. I held up the photograph again, the one Janie had left behind. "Do you remember this?" I asked. Mila looked at it for a long time. Then she nodded, softly. Slowly, I pointed to Milo. "He was with you even then." She nodded again, and now, she turned to him, eyes wide. "Lo," she whispered. Then she looked at me, and though she didn't say it, I heard it in her silence. "And you, too." That night, we stayed up later than usual. I read to her, not from a children's book, but from an old journal of my brother's. The words weren't stories, not really. Just thoughts, reflections, things about the woods, about loss, about the strange way time folds in on itself when you're grieving. She listened, not always understanding, but always watching, feeling. Milo rested with his head in her lap. The fire crackled low. When she finally fell asleep, one hand still gripping the edge of the photo. I stayed up, staring into the flames, thinking. There hadn't been a knock on the door in 2 days, no more envelopes, no more sightings, no distant vehicles creeping along the edge of the woods. The world had moved on, it seemed, and left us with the quiet. But quiet isn't nothing. It's a weight you have to carry. 2. The next morning, I wrote 3 words on a sheet of paper and pinned it to the inside of the cabin door before we left. We were here. That was all. No names, no contact, no explanation, just proof that something had happened in this place, something worth remembering. Milo rode in the back seat, eyes on the rear window. Mila sat in the middle, bundled in layers of warmth, fingers gripping the stuffed bear now, missing an ear and an eye. She didn't cry when we pulled away. She just watched. The cabin disappeared. Behind us like fog burning off a lake. I didn't look back. Not out of resolve. Just because I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't in the cabin. It was in the seat beside me. We didn't go far. A small town, 30 miles east. 1 road in, 1 gas station, and a school that looked like it hadn't changed in 20 years. I found a short-term rental above a closed hardware store. The kind of place no one asked questions, especially if you paid in cash. I told the woman at the front desk my niece was staying with me for a while. She didn't press, just nodded and handed me a key. I bought groceries that night, peanut butter, bread, apples, a pack of dog food with a picture of a shepherd on the front. Milo sniffed the bag when I brought it in, then sat down like he'd earned it. He had me explored the apartment with her hands. She touched every window pane, every doorknob, every curtain edge, as if cataloging the new space, committing it to whatever internal map she'd been building all along. She didn't speak much, but that night, as I tucked her into the smaller bed, she reached up and touched my face, soft, intentional, and said 1 word, "Stay." It wasn't a question, it wasn't a command, it was a truth. I stayed. Milo curled at the foot of her bed, and for the first time in a long time, sleep came without resistance. The next day, I sat in the park across from the library while she played. She didn't run far, just traced shapes in the gravel with her boots, stopping every few steps to glance back toward me and Milo. We sat on the bench like 2 sentinels, side by side, watching her draw the world in her own time. A man passed by with a stroller. A woman jogged by with headphones in. No one stared. No one asked. And for a moment, I let myself believe that this was what healing looked like. Not fixing the past. Not erasing the scars. But choosing to be here. Together. Now, Mila crouched low, picked up a leaf, and ran toward us. She held it out to me like an offering. I took it. "Thank you," I whispered. She pointed to the leaf. "Lo," she said, and turned to place it gently in front of Milo's paws, then looked back at me, and added softly, "You." A second offering, a second name, and I felt something in me settle, like maybe I had a name again. 2. The breath before the silence. There was no ending, not the kind that fits neatly in a sentence, or folds into a photograph. Just a day like the ones before it, stitched quietly onto the others. But I remember it, not because of what happened, but because of what did and single quotes. No knocks on the door, no more letters, no more looking over my shoulder, just a moment that settled like dust in a sunbeam and didn't move. We'd been in the new town 3 weeks by then, enough time for routines to find us, for Mila to recognize the corner where the baker gave out crusts of bread, for the neighbor's dog to stop barking when we passed, for the air to lose the tension it carried when we first arrived. Mila woke earlier now, not out of fear, not out of habit, just because she wanted to see what the morning looked like. That day, she was already dressed by the time I turned from the sink. Her little boots were mismatched, her sweater on backwards, but she wore it all, like it was armor. She looked up at me with a face that had forgotten how to frown. She didn't ask permission. She just held out her hand. I took it. Milo followed us down the stairs and out into the morning. His joints were stiffer now. I could see it when he stood too quickly, but he never showed pain when she was near. He moved like duty still lived in his bones, and love was stronger than age. The street outside was still damp from the night's rain, a trail of leaves scattered down the curb. The sun hadn't broken through fully yet, just light grazing the tops of buildings, turning windows gold. We walked toward the field behind the library. It had become hers, not in ownership, but in presence. She had named the trees in her own way, scattered stones to mark invisible boundaries. When she walked there, she didn't hesitate. She knew the map her feet were making. I sat on the bench with Milo, while she wandered to the far end of the grass. Her hands reached out to catch the breeze. She twirled once, not for us, not for anyone, just because her body remembered something joyful. She fell gently into the grass, arms spread, eyes open to the sky, and I let myself believe it, not the ending, the beginning. Later that afternoon, it rained again, soft, easy, the kind that doesn't ask you to run inside. We stayed on the porch, watching it bead along the railings and roll down the backs of our hands. Mila sat in my lap, her head tucked beneath my chin. The weight of her was different now, not heavier, just more certain. She pointed toward a single bird hopping through the puddles. It stopped, tilted its head, and flew off. She followed it with her eyes, then whispered something so quiet, I barely caught it. Go, she said. I looked down. Do you want to go? I asked. She shook her head. No, she said again. It go. The bird. She was narrating the world, putting sound to motion, claiming it for herself. And behind us, Milo let out a long, slow breath, the kind that ends with a sigh, like wind leaving a tired house. He shifted and lay beside us. Front paws extended toward the edge of the porch, chin on the wood. Mila reached down and placed one hand between his ears. She didn't stroke, didn't pat, just held, like sealing a promise. And I realized she hadn't called for him once that day, not because she didn't need him, because she knew he'd never leave. That evening, I cooked a meal for all three of us, rice, soft vegetables, a slice of peach on the side of her plate. She ate everything but the peach, then handed it to Milo. He sniffed it, looked up at her. She nodded, and he took it, as if he understood the gesture was sacred. Afterward, we sat in the living room. I opened the notebook. She watched as I wrote. She always did, eyes curious, but never interrupting. I think she thought the words were a kind of spell, a way to keep what we had from slipping away. The storm brought them. The silence held them. The choice became ours. Milo shifted and laid his head on my foot. I added one more line. She sleeps through the night now, and when she wakes, she belongs. The final moment didn't feel final, just small, simple. Mila asleep in the bed beside the window, one hand against the glass, her breath leaving faint clouds that vanished before I could count them. Milo on the rug, one paw twitching softly in a dream I couldn't enter, and me, sitting nearby, not needing to watch them anymore, but doing it anyway. Because sometimes love looks like stillness. Sometimes it sounds like nothing, and sometimes it lives in the breath you hold, the one you let go of quietly, when you realize you no longer need to listen for footsteps that never come. The rain had stopped. The world didn't announce it. It just paused. Mila shifted in her sleep, curling into the blanket. Milo breathed deep. I closed the notebook, turned down the lamp, and just before the room faded fully too dark, I whispered something I hadn't let myself say until now. You're home. Not to either of them, not even to myself, just into the quiet. And the quiet answered, not with words, not with movement, but with something deeper, stillness, the kind that doesn't mean absence, the kind that means peace.